The next guest is someone who I got to meet a few years ago at the Paris AI Summit, and someone I've really wanted to interview on stage for a long time because I think he brings a really fresh and interesting perspective to the AI conversation. Please help me welcome Mistral CEO Arthur Mensch.
Hello.
Set that down. I want to record all the insights that I'm going to get for you using AI. Although, as Atif said, we shouldn't be talking about when we're using AI. We should just be doing it. So the last time we had a chance to really talk in public was at that AI summit. How have things been? Mistral, obviously, for those who don't know, kind of, one of the leading non-US or Chinese AI companies, one of the leading AI companies, period, I think you would say. How has Mistral grown in the last couple of years?
Compared to February last year, we did 20 times. That's been quite a high growth, and so it's been a pretty busy year in terms of business, in terms of growing the team as well, in terms of technology, as we've really pushed the capabilities of the open source models that we've released, but also build the platform on top to deliver value to the enterprise, which is really the business where we are investing. And so that's was a busy year. It's going to be a busier year even in 2026. Everything that we've said from the beginning of Mistral, which is that customization was important, which is that control and strategic autonomy on the topic of AI was important for multiple reasons, turned out to be true and to be true faster than what we even expected. So that's been quite interesting.
Well, I want to talk about finance and some other topics later on, but I want to dive in on open source because I think when some people talk about open versus closed, it's more of a religious debate than a business debate. But my guess isn't that isn't how your customers think. Do you feel like they're coming to you because you're open source, or they're coming to you and the fact that you're open source lets them do what they want to do?
I mean, they come to us because we know how to get them to the outcomes they need. And usually that entails customizing the systems, and that entails customizing all the way to the models. And if you have a policy where you assume that the models is not where the value accrues, but that the models are essentially free, but that it matters to actually train them, and it matters to be the one who certify that these have been trained on good data, etc., then it makes a lot of sense for us to open source, and it makes a lot of sense for our customers to rely on open source systems. And so that ability to customize the systems deeply, and that ability to deploy it wherever they want it to be deployed, so whether on-prem, on private cloud, and on Mistral Compute, which is our infrastructure on Davos, or whether on the edge, which is actually a very fast-growing business for us, edge and robotics. Well, open source matters because you basically want some infrastructure technology that you're going to build upon. And all infrastructure technology and software have historically been open source. And so what we've seen from a competitive perspective in the last year is that we took the leadership in releasing open source models in the West. In the West, meaning Europe and the US. We've been mostly head-to-head with Chinese companies that are releasing extremely strong models, and effectively that competition have led us to be around 2-3 months away from the closed source model. So it's a very interesting dynamic where what we've essentially been saying from the very beginning, which is that the model layer is a free layer, is turning out to be true, and that what matters is customization.
Given that, why use your own models? Why train your own models? Why not let someone else do the hard work if you're not going to get the value from that?
Well, we get the value from knowing how to train models, because when we work with customers to do deep verticalization in specialist domains, when we connect them, when we connect ourselves to their proprietary modalities, whether images or time series or whether text-based data, which is fully different from what we can observe in our training set, our ability to train at scale is extremely critical. So that's a key aspect. So owning the training stack is super important. Now, the other thing which is important, and that relates to the competition that we see in between us and I would say the Chinese models, is that a model is essentially a compression of knowledge, and you can put anything in it. So in particular, when you start using it for coding, that's something you want to make sure that the model are not going to introduce some flaws or some security problems. And if you don't work with a trusted partner, that is the one that is producing the open source models, then it's a little more difficult because you're essentially, since you don't have access to the training data, so you don't exactly know how the things have been produced, you need to trust the one that has produced it. And that's where it is important for our customers that we're able to train our models.
And I want to talk about the enterprise because I assume that's still most of your business is enterprises.
This is 95% of our businesses.
From your work with different businesses of all sizes, where is AI delivering the most value today for the companies that are succeeding, that are moving from pilots to production? Obviously, we know about coding, we know about customer support, and a few of the areas. Where else are the companies finding success, and what helps them succeed?
So beyond those two things, which are pretty well established, I would say on the customer care side of things, it's still a little early, I would say. Enterprises will have a tendency to say that they're adopting at fast, etc. But if you go internally in general, there's a little more friction than that. But where we see success is when companies go with a certain function to fully automate and to fully reorganize around AI processes and AI management. And that's especially true in supply chain. In supply chain, you need to deal with multiple actors, multiple legacy software, and you need to run long and durable processes. And so for those, if you put the right effort, and if you combine AI-generated code with LLMs that can interact with dynamic input, you can actually get to 80% improvement in dispatching containers. You can get to large improvements in ensuring that, like in managing your bills of materials. So that's a big area related to, we work a lot with manufacturing companies, so that comes up quite often, and it's core to their business, it's core to their operations. So yeah, supply chain management, very, very big. And then what is exciting, but again, quite early, but we see a lot of signs that this is going to accelerate things, is the fact that like research companies that do a lot of research and development have engineering problems. Their biggest source of acceleration is reducing their development cycles, and that typically takes more than software engineering because you need to know the physics of the systems you're building. You need to embed AI into the systems themselves. And when we work with ASML, for instance, which is a very engineering-heavy company, but not a very software engineering-heavy company, we are bringing them leverage on things that are mechanical engineering, physical engineering, and that is where, again, this is early, but that's where we see a lot of opportunities. So AI accelerating technological progress. And what's interesting there is that you do need to go into customization of the models themselves because you're lacking the vertical expertise and the data we are lacking it to do it ourselves, and so we do it with partnerships.
That makes sense. The other thing, a lot of companies have said they're getting stuck. They're having trouble getting the ROI they thought they could as they move from pilots to production. When you hear that, when you see that, where is it that companies that are getting stuck, what tends to make them get stuck?
Well, I think the issue is they don't think, and that's what we try and solve in the first place when you go into those enterprises. The issue is they don't think about building AI applications as something that have a life cycle, where you build something, it's not working, it's only working 80% of the time, then you need to iron out the details. You're building a workflow automation. The problem is not the 80% happy path automation that will work. It's the 20% edge cases that will go and require human to intervene. And so that part is actually where it's hard because you need to have an iterative process. You need to have a data scientist mindset where you look at evaluation, which again means that you need to observe everything, and then you figure out what kind of data do you need to make sure that the next time you see this edge case, this is not going back to a human. So that approach, which also entails bringing beta deployment that are not fully accurate to the people, and so that also means that you need the right human and machine interactions. That's where the things get stuck. Because the prototypes looks good, you've seen it, you've shown it to the COMEX, they're excited, but then it doesn't work. And you need to go to the 20% that remains, and that's where you need to iterate on the systems, you need to connect to more data, you need to eventually to actually modify the weights.
Totally. And two technical directions I've heard a lot about this week and we've reported are going to be big this year, and they would require big new investments from you. And I'm curious which of these two or both or neither you're pursuing. One is world models that understand the physics of the real world versus language, and the other is models that improve upon themselves. Demis Hassabis was talking about, Richard Socher, this idea that the models can learn as they go. And I'm curious, for Mistral, obviously you don't have unlimited resources. Which of those two, if either, are you pursuing?
We're not investing on the world model side. On the other hand, because we work with robotics company, we're really investing on making perception models that can reason quickly and under resource constraints. Because the issue with robotics is that you have latency constraints and you also have reliability constraints. So you can't assume that you're going to be always connected to the web. So that's highly intelligent perception models that are fast and reliable is a key. We're using a word-free approach because historically in the last 10 years this has worked very well. So having a model-free approach of the world and just relying on images that you get and on the data is, I think, the bitter lesson that we've learned in the last 10 years. Now, on the second aspect, I do agree with Demis. It's a very important problem. The question is it a model problem or is it a system problem? And to a large extent, we think it's a system problem, where if you want the model to continuously improve, what you actually first want to do is to have the model to continuously update its context. So the issue we'll always have is that because of memory constraints on GPUs, you can only feed that amount of data onto the model itself. And so you need a form of hierarchy of memories that are colder and colder and larger and larger. And one of the things that I think is very key, in particular in the enterprise for automation, is to have a context layer that is connected to the different sources of data and that continuously, overnight, update the representation of what the enterprise is actually doing. And that's effectively using LLMs. It's not a change in the deep architecture, but this is what you do when you sleep as a human. You update your memory and your representation, and that's what you use in the day that follows. And it's a very similar problem in the enterprise. You do need to have this continuously updated context engine.
So the model itself isn't changing, but it's kind of reminding itself of the context.
Well, you know, if there's a lesson that we've learned really in the last 10 years, is that you take a transformer and then you work on the data, and that's where you get the improvement. So make the transformer better, work on the outer loop, work on the sources of data, and you get the improvement. You can work a little on the subtleties of how the transformer is working, but most of the alpha is really in how you orchestrate things.
So I took us a little in the weeds. I want to dig back out to the big picture and talk a little geopolitics. Mistral is often framed as Europe's answer to the US AI giants. When does being European give you an advantage, and when is it a challenge in terms of whether that's capital, compute, speed?
Well, 25% of our business is linked to aspects that where the fact that we bring full control, on-prem deployment, and that we'll soon be able to deploy full cloud AI services that are fully hosted by Mistral and so decoupled from hyperscalers. This fact is key. It's key in public sectors. We work with around 10 states in the European Union. Some of them are very large contracts and very ambitious. And the other part is defense. Sovereignty and strategic autonomy is about economy. It's about having economic leverage to not pay too much of a price. For once all of your processes are running on AI, you're going to pay a steep price if you don't have leverage. But it's also about strategic autonomy in the sense of defense. Defense systems are now using AI everywhere, from the control centers to the drones. And if you don't have that, you don't have deterrence. And if you have a deterrence that is depending on a foreign country that may not always be aligned with what you want to achieve, then that's a problem. That's no longer deterrence. So it's a very big driver, and to a large extent, we're pretty much uniquely positioned there. And that applies to Europe. That also applies to the rest of the world outside of US and China. And so we have a very large business in Singapore. We have a growing business in Morocco. So there are a lot of countries that are also looking for an alternative to US providers and to Chinese providers. And we provide that edge. And so that's important. But again, it's 25% of our business. 75% that remains are rather linked to the way we engage, the way we deploy people, the way we customize systems, and the fact that we're building on top of open source models.
And I'm curious how, if at all, it's changed in the last year or so as the U.S. taken a harder line on trade, technology, threatening to invade Greenland, those sorts of things. Has there been a growing desire to reach out to you because you're not a U.S. company and because you're not a Chinese company?
Yeah, it has. I would say it made things very concrete because when we were talking about AI and strategic autonomy in that, in 2023, when we raised our first round, well, people would look at it and it would tell us, look, we've lost the cloud battle, so we're never going to make it. Turns out that AI is actually changing the way you make cloud so you can make it, and that's what we're doing. And it turns out that the sovereignty aspect and technology being used as a leverage and strategic interest being disaligned turned out to be quite true. So the last year that effectively drove, I would say, the geopolitical situation, drove our business and validated the thesis around control, around customization, and around the decoupling of the world that we're observing.
And when you compete against US capital companies, not just for business, but for capital, for compute, what is the hardest part about being a French company, being not in the US? And what matters less than people think?
I'd say capital flows to opportunities, and so to a large extent, this never has been a problem. We have actually managed to reloot European at our cap table in our last round, with ASML investing a large stake. And so we think it's good because we think it makes sure that the value we're creating actually flows back to the European economy and is reinvested. I'd say we have challenges in Europe in terms of availability of very senior executives. That's a problem, but that's linked to the fact that this is a younger ecosystem. So I can't go and find like a new CMO if I'm looking for a new CMO, and I don't have like a pool of 20 people, 20 CMOs that have already done it in previous companies. So the fact that we're pretty much there isn't that many companies at our scale in Europe makes it a little harder in hiring executives. On the compute side, Europe has this grid, which is much better than the US grid. And so what's happening is that we have available power in the coming years that is effectively could be an advantage for the European economy. And so what we are doing is that we are investing to benefit from this and to make sure that the excess of energy we have can be turned in excess intelligence and can be turned in revenue that can be reinvested in R&D to make the systems better in Europe. So that's how we try and navigate things. Again, we have a third of our business and a third of our team, which is actually in the US, and it's growing in the US. So what the differentiation we have is not a European differentiation. And we see that really customization, independence is also a key topic in the US. But we have a unique position in Europe, and we are investing to make it stronger and to be competitive with some of the US solutions.
With all the talk about AI this week, it's hard to even ask the bubble question, but I've been asking a lot of the people on stage, and again, not because AI isn't real. The internet was real and we still had a .com bust. It really had less to do with whether we were in the middle of a fundamental shift, which we were then, and I think we are now, and more to do with, are we investing the right amount at the right time? Like, if there's going to be a bust, I assume it's going to be a temporary thing, and I assume it's going to be because we put in too much money too soon to get the returns. I'm curious, do you think there are any bubbles in the AI sector, and if so, where?
Well, what I know is that the viscosity of the enterprise adoption is higher than what is advertised. So it's actually hard to reorganize your large enterprise around AI systems and around AI automation. And we are at the very beginning of that. And it's true even in the most advanced companies. So that's one thing. I think we'll get there. It turns out that you need a certain layer of services because enterprises actually lack the competence to deploy themselves in general. So a little bit of people can help. And I think we'll get there. I think it will take more years than what we expect. And to get enterprises to scale, that's going to take a little longer. So now, it's more than $1 trillion opportunity because down the line, like a significant fraction of the GDP will be running on AI systems. The question is when. And so that's the question. We all select how much we want to invest and how much at risk we want to be.
And what's your thesis?
I mean, we're investing quite a lot. We are growing our footprint. Our physical footprint is growing very fast in Europe, in particular. So we're investing less than some of the American labs. Also on the basis that I think a lot of the capacity today and the infrastructure requirement is driven by training. But the problem with training is that there are so many companies doing training today that this is all going to be open source in the long run. So can you justify spending 10 billion on the next training run if down the line, like 3 months after, you have an open source solution that works as well, but that is more customizable and where you have more control. So that's where we need to navigate the things well, and we are reinvesting, and we've raised a lot of capital last year. We are building physical capacity in Europe, and we see that this is validated by the growth that we see. we think that we still need to put a lot of sweat in making enterprise adopt AI fast enough. That's the key to making sure that this is not a bubble.
Well, unfortunately, I think we're going to have to leave it there, but I hope we'll get to chat again soon, maybe on the other side of the pond at one of our AI summits. Please give a round of applause for Arthur Mensch.